Hi. Today I want to review a book called Fast Food Nation. Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. This book was written in 2001, so it's 19 years old. A lot of the statistics that he uses in the book, I'm sure, are out of date, but that doesn't really matter. It's still a really good read. It's all about fast food in America and around the world. I would imagine in the past 19 years, there have probably been fast food restaurants added in America and across the world, in Europe and in other places in Asia. But, that would be something interesting to read about, to see how the industry has expanded in the past 19 years, because I'm sure that it has. He spent a lot of time talking about McDonald's in this book, because I guess at the time they were probably the biggest fast food chain. I don't know if that's still accurate or not. But this book was really good. He starts off by talking about how fast food started, and I was not aware that it started in Southern California, and it's intricately tied to the rise of suburbia and people starting to drive cars. But he talks about the founding fathers of fast food and how each chain got started, which I thought was kind of interesting. There's a big section in here about what it's like to work in a fast food restaurant and how the pay is low. They try to make it like an assembly line. They try to make the job as simple as possible so they can train people as quickly as possible. And apparently there are laws in some states that give fast food restaurants sort of like a tax break or a credit for hiring certain types of workers. So they can sometimes hire people and get that credit, and then the person quits or they get fired within a few months, and the restaurant has hardly had to pay anything at all for that employee, which of course drives fast food prices down. It makes the food cheaper if there's not a lot of labor cost. But he goes into how boring and how simple the jobs are, and it's not really something that people enjoy doing. He also talks a lot about how French fries are made, and just the enormity of the process is interesting, and I think certainly worth reading this book just to read about the French fries and how, I guess it was McDonald's, wanted everything to be uniform. So they started, just buying a certain type of potato, and then farmers all started growing that one type of potato because McDonald's was buying so many French fries. And it also says that at the time of the writing anyway, McDonald's was the biggest purchaser of beef in the United States. And, he talks about how cattle are raised and how chickens are raised. And I'm a vegan, I've read a lot of books about factory farms, so a lot of that wasn't new to me. He did seem to do a lot of his research in Colorado, which I thought was interesting because I live in Colorado, and the towns that he talked about, I know where they are, I know about the towns. But he talked to a rancher in Colorado, and that guy was trying to raise his beef the right way, letting the cattle roam on grassland and eat grass instead of feeding the cows grain, which is what happens on feedlots. They try to feed cows grain so that they gain weight quickly, and then they can sell them for meat faster that way. But that part of the book was a sad story. I won't ruin it for you, but it was hopeful to see that there was a rancher that he talked to that was doing the right thing, but it wasn't a happy ending to that story. He talks about meat packing and how, you know, at the turn of the century, like in the early 1900s, butchers were paid well and it was considered a skilled job. And now meat packing plants employ unskilled workers, often people who don't speak English in the US. They're often illegal immigrants that are brought to this country for the specific purpose of working in meatpacking plants. And they just stand, it's like an assembly line, they stand in one spot all day, they make the same cut thousands of times, it's completely unskilled, and it's very, very dangerous. He says it's the most dangerous job in the US. Lots of people get injured. They either cut themselves or they cut the person standing next to them in line by accident, of course. But you know, the lines are moving so fast that they can barely keep up, and their knives are just swinging all over the place, and there are accidents, there are amputations, and you know, he talks a lot about how meatpacking plants try to cover up the injuries and try to get people to not go to the doctor, if at all possible. And then another section of the book, he talks about pathogens that are in meat, and you know, how when you take thousands of cattle that are sick and infected with E. coli or other pathogens, and you grind them all up together, you can really spread the pathogens all over the place quite quickly. And he talks about how fast food restaurants have, over the years, tried to minimize publicity about pathogen outbreaks in their food. And when they recall food, they don't necessarily recall all of the questionable meat because they don't want it to be a big publicity scandal. You know, and then he talks about fast food moving across the world in Europe and in Asia, and the health effects of that spread across the world, and how, you know, people in countries where they were traditionally healthy and fit, they start to become overweight and obese because of the American way of life and the fast food restaurants that are in their country. This was an excellent book, even though it's 19 years old. I highly recommend reading it. I do not eat fast food. I haven't for years. But I just thought it was interesting because he makes such a case for how big an industry it is and how it affects so many people's lives. Definitely a good read. I give it 5 stars out of 5. Again, it's called Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. I hope I'm saying that right. So pick up a copy or go to your library. Definitely a good read and a quick read. Yeah, so 5 stars out of 5.